CLIL 18, Moving to English Medium Education, recorded on December the 6th, 2011. So we've got an interesting theme today, moving to English medium education, and this has come from some of you and discussion over the last few weeks and months about developments, really, and I put notes on the Fact World website about our very broad agenda. I'll try and copy it and stick it in the chat area where we're all speaking. So I think I can do that here, and you should all see the link if you're not sure what it is. So if you haven't printed out the notes that I put up there, you can click that link and go and take a look if you need a reminder. One of the reasons I put this in our program is 3 trips I've had recently where I hear an opinion, a comment from colleagues which I find a little bit worrying regards CLIL. And those countries are specifically Holland, Austria and Switzerland, and I thought we could talk a little bit about your experiences. Noreen, for example, what you're doing in Saudi Arabia sounds quite relevant and interesting, and from other colleagues as well in terms of what's happening in English medium education, where you are and where you've been recently. The other point I put on our 3-point agenda was Africa and English medium education, because I've been involved in a project recently which has teachers moving from one other language to English as a medium of instruction, and all that entails. I just thought the general questions and issues involved in that. Why do CLIL? You know, why take on another language? We can mention some of the very broad issues, but also some of the details. I think some of the niggly problems that are very clearly likely to occur. And then thirdly, I thought advice. I'm sure within an hour of our discussion we can throw out some very useful tips and advice, I think, to offer to systems taking on English as a medium of instruction. And those are the 3 points I wrote down, so it's very clear and very concise. But don't worry, as usual, about going off in another direction. I think that's quite a charming aspect of our discussions, that we do go off in other directions. Now, Phil's just arrived, so I'm going to try and bring him in. But do feel free, anybody, to make a start any way you like while I bring Phil in. That's a challenging, always the same, isn't it? So I'm bringing Phil in.
Hi there.
Phil.
Hi, Phil.
How you doing? Sorry I'm late. Sorry, long Spanish lunches.
Yeah, sure. Don't worry, we've got Lubov. I think you can see everybody, can't you? Lida, Noreen, Dennis and Patty and myself.
Yeah.
And all I've done so far is fiddle around with the technology. Thank goodness it's working, I hope. And also set the agenda, Phil, which are those 3 points that are on the website for moving to English medium education.
Yeah.
In very brief terms, news about events and countries we've been involved in recently. And number 2, I put in there Africa and English medium education because of a recent project I've been involved in myself. And number 3, advice to offer to systems about moving towards CLIL and English medium education. And then I said to everybody, while I bring you in, would somebody like to start? And there was a bit of silence. Can I tell you then about my 3 trips, and it might draw some comments from you. I recently visited the Europa's platform national conference in Holland and gave a plenary there and a workshop. And there were 600 plus teachers in the audience. I think it's the biggest audience I've ever spoken to personally. And I sat in on a maths teachers meeting during the rest of the day. And there were about 20 maths teachers, all either teaching through English with varying years of experience or about to teach in English in what is in Holland a growing system. And the overriding opinion in that group was, well, I don't really see what this CLIL thing is all about. And we talked a little bit about what, if anything, CLIL offers to Dutch teachers of maths doing their maths in English as a foreign language. And it was quite shocking, I think, for me personally, to see that they didn't see any benefit of a CLIL approach to doing their subject. What they tended to agree on as a group was what they do was just do what they do in English. They don't really focus on language per se. And that is the same opinion I met in Switzerland as well, in a training context of mixed subject teachers doing in-service training to do their teaching through English as a foreign language. And also in Austria recently. I've been involved in an ongoing in-service training program where there are numbers of teachers who don't really get the CLIL thing. They don't really get the CLIL message. And I wondered what your feeling about that is as a group, if you've felt anything similar or the opposite in your experiences.
Can I come in, Keith? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Phil.
Right, yeah. See if my tonsils will last. My throat's not too good, but that time of the year, isn't it? Well, I've had similar experiences in Holland and Switzerland. I can't talk for Austria, but perhaps, to kick it off, I would possibly. I don't wish to pontificate here without knowing enough, but from what I can see, if you take Holland, for example, I think that you say the CLIL thing, but the CLIL thing obviously does get conditioned to some extent by the objectives, or you might say the national objectives behind picking up CLIL. And I mean, Holland does things on a national basis. It's not like Spain or Germany. And I think that if you look at the Dutch, if we talk about English medium education particularly, it's perfectly obvious that everybody speaks pretty decent English. I mean, the contrast with Spain is brutal. It's just a socio-cultural thing. It's not good or bad. I'm not criticising. It just happens. And so obviously, if you've got a national CLIL or a national English medium or whatever medium program, then obviously you're not doing it in order necessarily to increase the contact hours with that target language, which you are in Spain. I mean, one of the objectives is to do that. I mean, obviously there are lots of other objectives that we can talk about in CLIL. We know that they're not purely linguistic, but I think in Holland, obviously what they're doing, or from what I can tell, is that what they're doing is fine-tuning their academic language. What's interesting about Holland is that everybody speaks English, great, they all speak really well. But if you look at, say, a 16-year-old in Spain who's been through a decent CLIL program, and you look at a 16-year-old in Holland, you'll find that CALP-wise they're fairly equal. BICS-wise they're probably not. The Dutch kid will almost destroy the Spanish kid. But in terms of CALP, they're probably pretty similar. And I think that's what's happening in Switzerland. I was there last year and I got exactly the same message, well, what's this all about? We're doing it anyway, kind of thing. I think really it's a question of Switzerland and Holland and places like those who have already got, English, let's say, as very much a part of their sociocultural beings. It's very much a part. I think they have to just sit down and say, well, what is our objective there? Exactly why are we doing it, and what can we get from it? I think they're doing that, Keith. I mean, I can't believe.
I agree. But would you say then, with what you've just said, would you say then that there is a level of language beyond which the CLIL thing does become redundant?
No, I think there's a level of BICS where it might become redundant for certain objectives. I think that if you take your average country, working with the Czechoslovakians at the moment in Prague and stuff, and I mean, it's very different. It's obvious that the only way that they can possibly get up the level of English, if that is a general objective for so many countries now, and it is, of course. The way they can do it is by somehow expanding the contact hours, and why not kill two birds with one stone, going back to the old CLIL cliche. And I think that's very much a major part of the objective as it will be written down. But I don't think that can possibly be the objective in countries, Scandinavian countries, in Holland and Switzerland, where English is already so much sewn into the socio-linguistic fabric, and so. But I think that they've got to be a bit careful about what they're saying. If they're saying that CLIL doesn't offer us anything, I think they're making a mistake. Yeah, sure.
I just wanted to highlight a couple of terms Phil used, BICS and CALP, if any of you are not sure of those acronyms. BICS is basic interpersonal communicative skills. So the chat, if you like, the conversation language between kids, and CALP is academic language proficiency, so the specific language of the curriculum, broadly, those are what those terms mean. And I think to bring this discussion to Holland, it is very interesting because the teachers themselves complain about aspects of their students' success which are very clearly language focused problems. Very broad complaints like, how can I get them talking more in the classroom? There are rumblings of complaints about the academic language in the Dutch language as well within that group of colleagues. Specifically, I met in the maths teachers meeting. And I think, in a way, giving a blanket rejection of CLIL is really avoiding those issues, that those details of what goes on in an English medium maths lesson. CLIL is all about the teacher thinking, how do I get them talking? Well, CLIL is about finding that solution, how to get them talking. And it's also about providing that academic language. And those two aspects are really at the heart of CLIL for me, which I suspect, Phil didn't mention it, but maybe the delivery of CLIL training doesn't focus that much on language and task as much as many other things that are out there in the CLIL literature. And I suspect that's what's happening in Switzerland and Austria, as well as them being very proficient in English as a foreign language. The delivery of a CLIL training, of a CLIL methodology, is bringing in lots of aspects of CLIL, which are not necessarily about language and task, they're about lots of other things.
Yes.
And I think that's a problem.
Okay, Keith, may I make a few comments about the situation in the Netherlands?
Go ahead, leader.
You actually mentioned two things, that the Dutch speak English quite well, and that they don't see the benefits of CLIL. I think the problem, this is my hobby horse, is on the whole with subject teachers, that they don't feel that they are teaching in another language, in a new language. And now I don't mean teaching in English, but also teaching in Dutch. I mean, in Dutch you have to teach them the same way to talk about tasks, to make them talking, because for our students, the talking is not a problem, but talking sensibly about the task or the subject in their subject, that's the thing. And I don't think Dutch teachers are so aware that this is the issue. I mean, either in Dutch or in English.
Can I say something?
Can I? Oh, sorry.
Lubov, and then come in, Phil. Let Lubov have a go.
Yeah, I can't support Leader more. The situation in Bulgaria is absolutely the same as just what Leader described. For me, the whole CLIL thing is about methodology. And if you have the right type of task, following the right procedure, the right sequence, then it doesn't matter which language you are actually teaching through. It doesn't matter whether that's first or second language. That's the way I see it. But lots of teachers feel that teaching through English is absolutely different situation, and they don't see the point of doing it. And also, I'll link that to the Austria teachers who said that teaching through English actually doesn't provide good quality teaching for the students. I've heard students of mine feel exactly the same way. They don't get quality education because they're learning through English.
That's an interesting point.
Sorry, I have to go. But I made a mistake with the timing, but I really have to go now, and I will read everything.
Okay. Don't worry.
Sorry
Do join us again. Don't worry.
Next time, yes,
Sure.
please.
Bye-bye, Leader.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Can I
Try again. I think it might be with Leader leaving.
Yeah.
But don't worry. I think that's okay now. Is everybody back?
Yep. I'm here.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Dennis is connecting. Noreen, I think you were going to say something. Was it Noreen?
Yes,
Yep.
I was. One observation I have is that I think it may have something to do with teacher confidence in teaching their subject in a different way. I'm not sure that the teachers feel that they have the skills and the knowledge to set up a CLIL type task and interactive methodology to talk and to get their learners to discuss things. And I think it may be the confidence.
Yeah, the confidence, I suppose, related to awareness, Noreen.
Yes.
Awareness
yes,
about
it's part awareness.
Yeah.
It's partly awareness of what is suitable, and it's partly the skills of actually setting it up. And I think it is about classroom management and having a belief that what I'm doing is okay and I don't need to do anything else.
Well, I think you'd have to be careful about the context there, Noreen. You know, I mean, I think Keith's talking about, we've heard about Holland and Switzerland, and to be honest, the practice I've seen in Holland and Switzerland, the teachers are incredibly confident. I mean, Keith started by saying quite the opposite. It's not. It might be a lack of awareness, possibly, but I mean, I'm not sure it's a lack of confidence. I mean, in the Spanish context, I would agree with you, you know, but from what I've seen of those countries, a lot of the teachers are not short of confidence. You know, I hate to make a massive general.
Yeah, but I mean, in a way, Phil, it is a question of confidence. Because I think I can see an anxiety in the audiences I've worked with, the groups of teachers I've worked with, where these comments are coming from. There is a bit of anxiety, and that anxiety is to do with not knowing.
Mm.
So they might be confident in the classroom, but being confident about dealing with, you know, the foreign language of the subject is a challenge, isn't it? That may challenge their very confidence about what they're doing.
I think what Lida was saying was interesting, because if you take a very basic situation like teacher X is in June at the end of the academic year and is informed by his or her head of department that in September they're going to have to teach their subject through English, for example, and they've been teaching it through the native language for the last 30 years. I mean, you can imagine. I mean, I come across these people. You can imagine their reaction, and of course, the first reaction is indeed, as Noreen says, is a lack of confidence. But what happens is that they have to do it, and so the first thing they do at home is they think, well, I can't do it in the same way, you know, and that's the first. That's the first step to, you know, methodological awareness within CLIL. I'm not suggesting that teacher has had no methodological awareness in 30 years. There are certain things that can be transferred, you know, but the awareness that you can't do things the same way is the beginning of how to practice CLIL. It just may be in Holland, for example. Just to finish, it could be that in Holland as Lida was saying, people are so used to doing things through English, it doesn't even seem like a foreign language in Holland at times, that they don't see any distinction between teaching in Dutch and teaching in English. And, you know, it is an interesting point, really. I'm not quite sure what to conclude about that, because it's just nothing to do at all with the situation here in Spain.
Yeah, I think you've hit on something there, that it's not actually on the radar, is it? The issue of language. The teachers are so fluent, the students are so fluent, and also the ingredient of the Dutch situation is, which is a very significant factor for the school leaving preparation years. They go back to Dutch medium education. So, you know, the English medium experience is a temporary one.
Which I find weird, to be honest. I find that slightly weird, to be honest, but hey, there you go.
Well, it does happen in other countries as well. And I think that a main difference with the other context, with Switzerland and Austria, is that level of teacher language competence is very different to Holland. And it's in the agenda, really, because in Holland it's expanding, not just within the TTO schools, the bilingual schools, beyond the so-called bilingual elite school network to other types and age groups of schools. In Austria now, the government is offering students subjects where they do a whole year through the medium of English from their third year. in the, I have to get the title right, the technical high schools.
Mm.
Are you all still there? I get a message that there's a problem with the call.
Oh, it's gone. Oh, I'm okay.
Yep,
I'm here.
Okay. So I think the contexts are very, very different. But I think generally the wave of moving to English medium education is gathering pace in these countries, and also in Switzerland. It's a growing phenomenon, and I suspect also in Spain, Phil, around the different regions of the country. It's you compare the Spanish less successfully with these other countries we've mentioned, but nevertheless they are setting in place structures and infrastructures for making things work. And I do talk about Spain as being a success story, although a lot of my Spanish colleagues disagree with me when I say that.
Well, I think that's because you've got to distinguish. Your meeting, it was fine before I came on.
No, I don't think so. It might be my internet service provider, who knows. What, you were going to say something, Phil? Try again.
I think there's a crucial distinction. I think what you said is very important, and there's a crucial distinction, and other, Nubiov as well might be interested in this phrase. But I mean, I think that Spain is you could call it a CLIL success story, but in general, the Spanish educational system is a bit of a disaster. The good practice in Spain is through CLIL. In Holland, I don't think that's the case. I think that you've got a pretty good system in place, and the CLIL itself is just a kind of add-on, So however the Dutch themselves come to view CLIL, it's viewed in relation to they're quite pleased about their educational system in general. I think there are some strange things about it, talking about Holland, but I think the Austrians and the Swiss would probably say the same, The Spanish, it's the CLIL that's working in Spain, but the rest of it not. It's a big difference.
Yeah, CLIL's been a way to kind of sneak in new ways of doing things in the classroom.
Absolutely, yes,
Probably should have happened the other way around, but it didn't. So CLIL teachers doing lots of different things. My concern is what will happen now is that I don't know what's happening up in Basque Country, but here in Madrid and certainly in other areas of Spain, there's been such cutbacks in teacher training. It's just really not happening anymore. So that's a concern I have. I don't know what's happening in other countries when teachers are given the mandate to teach in English. Is that then supported by government-sponsored teacher training or follow-up in the classroom or supervision or... Hello?
Yeah, was that directed to Phil?
Just in general, because, I mean, I know what was happening in Madrid and what was happening in other areas of Spain, and that's not happening anymore. And I know other countries aren't in the same situation Spain's in, but I'm just curious as to other countries where teachers are suddenly told, yes, now you have to teach your subject in English. What are they given in the ways of teacher support or teacher training, or is there just an assumption, you know plenty of English, so now you teach your subject in English?
I do think that's the case in several countries, that as a consequence of the economic situation, like all training, projects that offer a CLIL focus are being cut back very broadly. That's particularly the case in Italy, I know from experience. But I think don't you think one of the deciding factors of success for this CLIL wave is it's still surviving despite economic crisis? There are countries that have set themselves up with structures and support and training and resources that they'll ride this problem period. Whereas I don't think it will in Italy. I think CLIL is probably, apart from individual projects that are run by very dynamic individual people, generally speaking, it's not on the agenda anymore. Listen, I think we've lost Noreen. She's probably fed up with us getting cut off every 10 minutes or so. I put that in the agenda really just to talk about those mutterings of discontent I have been hearing amongst teachers, and my personal feeling is I'd like to have a look at what kind of training they're being offered, and see whether or not they're looking at awareness of language within their subject and how to deal with subject-specific language and the needs of that, their students of that language, and then B, what kind of task design is being offered in terms of training that incorporates A, and I think for me that's what CLIL is all about. If the training is focusing on all sorts of other aspects of teacher development which teachers may or may not be aware of already, you open up a whole can of worms that's going to be very distasteful for a lot of teachers. But we don't have to bash on about that very one topic, because we've had quite a lot of input there. And I would like to talk a little bit about the why that's going on. And I use an example, if that's okay with you, number 2 in our agenda. I've been working on a project which sees teachers in Rwanda move from French medium education in their subjects to English medium education, and this is entailing teachers literally learning the language of their subjects in English to be able to go on and teach it. Very different context to Holland, of course. And we can talk a little bit about the why of these projects. Why do it through the medium of another language that's not already spoken very widely in the country? What about the resources? In the Rwandan context, the resources are being specially written for these teachers. Self-study resources for them to acquire A, the vocabulary, and B, the techniques of task design through the vocabulary resources. And are there good examples where we can pick up? And I put Spain again in my agenda list, that does support teachers who are more limited, let's say, in their English proficiency than teachers, say, in Holland. What do you think?
Do you want to go first, Patty, or go? You go first, Patty. Patty?
Are you all there?
Yeah.
Sorry? I couldn't understand what you just said.
Hello?
I think you went bubbly, Phil.
Patty, I'm good.
But I threw out 2 questions, really. Why do they do it? Why?
Hello?
Can you hear me, Patty? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Please. Over here, Phil.
I was just saying, maybe Patty could first.
I think Phil was offering the mic to you, Patty, if you wanted to comment.
Oh, sorry. I couldn't understand what Phil was saying. No, I mean, I have to say, you describing the Rwandan situation sounded exactly like the Spanish situation. To be honest, a lot of teachers have had to be trained in English as far as their proficiency for the classroom, as far as their knowledge of the subject vocabulary in English, and then at the same time classroom techniques in order to make the class time effective when being delivered through the second language. I don't know what will continue to happen with that in future, but up till now that has been the case. Teachers were able to even do CLIL classes, I believe, at the B2 level of English.
Okay. Yeah. And that, would you say that's due to and at the end of a process of ongoing teacher training, that these teachers reach that level in having developed their language and having been exposed to a CLIL methodology?
Yeah, I mean, teachers had to take specific classes. Whether if they were able to test out at a level of B2 or higher, they may not have had to have language development classes, but they have been required to take methodology classes. The difficulty I've seen with it is that there hasn't been ongoing consultation with these teachers once they're in the classroom. Once they're considered competent enough or considered to have passed through the basic essential training, then there's not really follow-up for them once they're in the classroom. They're kind of left to their own devices, which is what I see as the difficulty. I think if people want to implement this kind of program, it's fantastic, and a lot of really good things have happened because of it, but teachers need ongoing support.
Yeah, I'd like to stress that as well, that the context where teachers are left to themselves, I do see more failure, let's say, whether it's on an individual basis or on a project-wide basis. And that ingredient of CLIL, I think, although it's a structural managerial thing, I think it is very important to slam out that message that teachers have to be supported over the long term, whether it's in terms of their language, their methods, or their resources.
Right, because teachers do question. Good teachers are always questioning what they're doing, and they do need support to know if what they're doing is working, and if it is working, how to make it work even better.
It's absolutely fundamental. I mean, it's difficult for me to comment on this in a sense about the whole of Spain because, Keith, you've seen it here. I mean, the project here is very well developed and everything's in place. I mean, every single thing that you would want in place for any kind of educational project has been fulfilled by the BASC project. I mean, it hasn't really done many things wrong, and it's also been financed. That's the other thing. I mean,
it's still being financed now.
It's still being financed, although it's slightly less because PSOE got power, But I mean, there was a little bit of a drop in that. But I'm not crowing from the mountains here. I'm just saying that, and I've been saying for a long time that the rest of Spain sort of trying to keep a lot of the autonomous regions keep trying to reinvent the wheel when it's been perfectly well invented in the Basque Country. The Basques themselves just don't talk enough about it. That's the problem. It's just pains like me that come on these things and tell you about it. But I mean, what's very, very clear is what he's saying. It's you cannot possibly just have some kind of initial training period, whatever that consists of, and then just leave people to their own devices. I mean, formation continue, as they call it here, is completely crucial, and that's why it's worked here because I've been working with the same teachers, some of them, for the last 10 years. I mean, I've been writing materials with them and been in the classroom with them for 10 years, longer. I also keep on top of them. I mean, it's also a control thing.
And what sort of relationships do you see in your context in Spain between the English teachers and the subject teachers? Are there specific roles and relationships that you see as part and parcel of this, let's say, this success that we're describing, although you might not want to use that term as widely as I do? What are the roles that you see and relationships between the English teachers and the subject teachers, if any?
Well, that's right. I think actually that's one of the problem areas here. If you identified a weakness in the project here, for example, I'd say that was a weakness. But you have to ask yourself whether that weakness is a result of just natural circumstances or whether it's a policy thing. Personally, I think it's a bit of both. What I mean is that you probably know this, but when you're working at a school and you're teaching 25 hours a week, you just haven't really got time to bother with other people. You know what I mean? The reality of schools is so unless these schools in the early parts of CLIL projects have had teachers with reduced timetables, and then they've got departments that really do timetable meetings intra-department meetings. I mean, I've seen it working. But I've not, to be honest, in the 20 years here, I've not seen many schools where the coordination between the language departments and the subject departments has been good. It's generally been us doing it and not the language. We've tried very hard. We've tried to put policies in place, but you come up against all sorts of pragmatic and practical difficulties. Now, I'm a bit suspicious often of people who talk so ideally of these things, The other thing, Keith, is that I still, I've said before, but I don't actually think that your average English teacher is still trained properly to cope with that situation. And it's another problem. We talk about training subject teachers, but language teachers themselves don't really understand what CLIL is either. So it's a kind of double problem. I think Patty would agree, no?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, there are some places where it's been put in place so that teachers do coordinate, the language teacher and the subject teacher, and that's a fantastic initiative, but it needs to be put in the weekly schedule. It has to be a priority of the school and of the individuals involved. And when it's worked really well. It's been beneficial to both parties, but it is a logistical nightmare to organize.
There is a school in Spain. I've mentioned in a couple of contexts. I'm going to try and find it while I'm talking to you now, where the English department does work very closely with the subject teachers, and in fact to such an extent that the curriculum of the English teaching is based on what goes on in the subject classrooms.
That's what we're doing, Keith. That's
exactly the way it should be working.
Yeah, I've set up the English materials on the basis of the demands of the social science. Yeah, that's what we're doing. But that still doesn't quite mean You'd be surprised, Keith, but it still doesn't quite mean that there's that kind of narrow, close relationship between the two departments that you would expect, actually, because in a sense the materials work. If the materials work, the language teachers don't feel a great obligation. What we do in the meetings is we get them together, so that they can see what each other's doing. But over the whole year, it's sometimes difficult to sustain their interest. The English teachers are sitting there and you're talking about, well, yeah, the next unit's on the car lists, the 18th century in the Basque Country.
That's okay, isn't it? That's not necessarily a problem, is it? Because it's working, like you say, and maybe that's as much as you can aspire to achieve.
What happens, Keith, is that the great thing is that what's happened is that the social science teachers themselves, they become through it. They become much more aware of what the language demands are in social science by simply being aware of how we've done it in the English. I think that is quite powerful. It's been more powerful for the social science teachers than for the English teachers, to be honest. I'm not saying there's been no effect for the language teachers, but the effect has been mainly in the subject areas.
Sure. I was going to say your role has been actually producing book resources for language teachers, hasn't it, Phil? Alongside the social science curriculum.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So you're actually producing stuff that the English teachers can take into their classrooms, and that they'll be looking at the functions and the skills that are going on in the subject classrooms at the same time.
That's right, exactly, yeah. So, the English textbook has like 4 units or 8 units, there are 2 of them. So the first unit in the third of ESO, which are 15-year-olds, the first unit is called Culture Shock, okay? And it's a whole unit that goes on for about 2 months about what culture shock is, and the kids like it, and they actually have to compare Bulgarian teenagers with Basque teenagers, strangely enough. I was telling you about that, and of course, but why are they doing culture shock? Well, because in social science at that particular time they're working on contrast and comparison, and they're having to compare different communities in rural and urban situations. It's actually quite complex in terms of the language it brings into the ring. It's not just one is bigger than the other. There's an awful lot of language that, as it's stuck in there about comparison and contrast. So it's quite simple, really. Then there's a kind of cause and effect chapter, etc., etc., etc. So they don't. It's not so obvious that they're doing that, but the teachers are trained to understand that there's this connection between the English syllabus and the social science syllabus. Yeah.
Well, let me put in our discussion a bit of an announcement, Phil, because you already know, of course, that the next year's English Teachers Conference in Bulgaria is going to have a pre-conference CLIL event, and the theme of that event is going to be, what does CLIL offer English teachers?
Right.
And so, I think the reason I mention it here is because it is an issue for English teachers. CLIL gets on the agenda of English teacher conferences frequently, and I think occasionally for the wrong reasons, that it's a repackaging of a topic and task-based, project-based approach to language learning, when I think actually the kind of CLIL language focus that you're describing is the CLIL language focus that I warm to myself. It's a role for the English teachers that is one that has them facilitating the content curriculum with English language in a way that happens in tertiary education programs, ESP and English as an academic language programs at university.
Yeah, it's similar. Yeah. I mean, I think it looks at first quite a radical model. I'd say radical just because it's been quite difficult to set it up, but I think it's generalizable. I've said this to you before, and I think that it is one way of, as you say, offering a kind of, almost like an olive branch to the English language teacher world, who, on the one hand, they're suspicious about CLIL, and on the other hand, they want to get into it because they know that, their careers might depend on it. So it's kind of a strange situation at the moment, isn't it? I was in Madrid a couple of weeks ago. I did a talk for Macmillan, and it was 113 language teachers, and the title of the talk was, "Do you want to improve your language teaching?" ? I said, stop teaching language, because it was a provocative title, but you know what I mean.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, stop teaching language.
Well, I've been looking through some English language textbooks recently, to find ways of linking the textbooks to CLIL topics, and I am literally pulling my hair out while I'm doing this when I look at a unit of work in an English language textbook that is entirely based on comparatives and superlatives, you know.
Yeah.
Well, actually, there are quite a lot of content links you could do with comparison, but talking about predictions in the past and in the future, you know, it's such a language swamp that you find within language textbooks that they're almost it's almost impossible to move in a content way when you're stuck in a very rigid language curriculum that, like many textbooks are.
Well, that's absolutely right, Keith. I mean, it seems to me that the whole problem with the ELT world is that, you know, it can continue for the next 100 years quite happily in the way it's doing. But what's always been a problem, I think, with the ELT and the textbooks you're talking about is that it's not that it's content poor or language poor. What the problem is, it's procedurally poor. You know, there's actually an average chapter in an ELT textbook is not based on any procedural skills, if you like, or cognitive skills. It's based on either an underlying linguistic objective, which is fair enough, you're teaching language, or it might be based on the Amazon rainforest. But the Amazon rainforest is only a vehicle for, you know, talking about the second condition or something. What they're never based on, that's quite right. What they're never based on is cause and effect, for example. Now, I know you were telling me off for this a bit the other day, but you know what the problem is that the ELT has to move towards competencies. Unless it moves towards competencies, then it's going to die. It's going to die a death. It really is, you know. And the only way it can move into competencies is by taking procedural content.
Do you say then, if we set ourselves the task of producing a short booklet, say, of advice for language teachers at our CLIL event next year, that has in it, let's say, a section on content procedures for the language classroom, that's an achievable thing for us to do in a day in northern Bulgaria next year?
Yeah, I think, you know, well, you know, it depends where you start from or how you're selling it, in a sense, isn't it? You know, you'd have to say, look, you know, what do you basically want in your English classes? You want your kids to be interested, don't you? So, you know, you say, well, why are we going to talk about, we're not going to talk about the present simple and the present perfect. Oh, well, you know, perhaps people don't do that anymore. I don't know. A long time since I've been in that kind of English class, but you know, what we're going to talk about and why we're going to talk about things and what we're going to do at the end of them is really what English language teaching needs to look more carefully at. And I think CLIL's this wonderful world, isn't it? It's this wonderful world of procedural and conceptual content. It's this massive ocean of it, you know. And ELT just takes little bits of it, tiny little bits of it. It's absolutely weird.
It is.
Sorry.
No, don't apologise. I think you hit the nail on the head. And in perhaps for the last 5-10 minutes or so, then we could carry on and move into point 3, which is more about advice and direction, isn't it? And practical ideas. That one red flag of warning that I think we're starting to wave here is not to get stuck in a lexical, grammatical hierarchy within a CLIL language-focused course.
Mm.
Because I think that does happen. I suspect also it's one of the things that colleagues getting involved in CLIL initiatives become dissatisfied with the CLIL initiative because it has this lexico-grammatical focus without any of the competencies and procedures that you're mentioning here.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And then what you do is you see materials on the web which are, you know, purporting to be for CLIL. And I mean, I'm taking my hat off to people for trying, but what you find is that they're sort of leading with the language. It's strange. It's almost like going back to PPP or something. You know, you find these CLIL materials where they're discussing the language before they've even discussed the concepts. You know, and I mean, I'm not criticising. It's just that. That's right. The message that comes over is that it's lexico. Yeah, I mean the vocabulary and the lexical side of it, of course, is important. Of course it is, but it's only just a part of the calc, isn't it? That's what you're saying. Yeah, lexis is just a part of calc. In fact, it's probably in some ways, it's probably the least important part of CALP in the end. The most important part of CALP is the general academic discourse that students have to handle when they get older. And that they can't often in a second or a third language. That's where they start to come unstuck. Well, it's where they start to come unstuck in their own language, of course. That's what we haven't talked about yet.
So I suppose one suggestion you would say for systems moving to English medium education is, find a role for the language teachers which is based on the same competencies and procedures that the content teachers are focusing on.
Well, yeah, you'd have to put it in a slightly nicer way, wouldn't you? That would sound like you were just transferring the whole of the subject world into the what you would have to identify would be what you do have to identify, I think, would be the sort of things that subject teachers do well. It's a very funny thing, isn't it? You remember that first book that came out about CLIL? It was Teaching Other Subjects Through English by OUP. Came out about 6 years ago. Remember? It's still on the market.
Yeah.
I think everybody's read it now. I'm sure.
Yeah, I have it right here on my bookshelf.
Yeah, right. Now, there's nothing wrong with it in a sense, but it's quite totally bizarre. It just sort of takes the whole. It was written by the Pilgrims people, and so it takes like 30 years of ELFL practice and just throws it willy-nilly at the whole subject teaching world. There's not one page in that book that says, hey, this is what subject teachers do and do well. It's really weird. Now, I remember Keith saying years ago, CLIL, first of all, go into subject classes and look at what subject teachers do well. It's very strange. We've thrown all this EFL world at them, and of course it has worked in many ways. We've managed to show how subject teachers, how you can make activities and tasks and units linguistically rich, and how you can work the language, and how you can make it salient. That's absolutely fine, but we've never actually looked at it from the subject teacher's point of view. I mean, I'm saying this because Leah Bob's there and she's gone quiet, but I would have thought she would have had something to say here. I mean, it seems to me that you've also got to, in a sense, come from the subject teachers and what they do well. What do they do well? The language.
I think it also depends on what subject teachers are doing, and if they are doing it well, because I do know there are a lot of cases where a science class, might be taught in the first language very much as a reading comprehension subject. And that is not what you want to transfer to a CLIL context, where suddenly we just put our textbooks into English and we do reading comprehension all day.
Of course.
That does happen in geography classes, in science classes, and all kinds of classes.
Well, it happens in
so I think you have to be careful about saying just do what subject teachers do well, but now do it in English, depending on what your subject teachers are already doing.
Well, I used the adverb well. You didn't. I mean, we're both talking from the Spanish context here.
Obviously. I think that was a big misconception at first here in Spain was, now we just get textbooks in English and now we just do our class as we've always done it. And strike me down if you ever thought I was saying that. Yeah, of course not. No, I completely understand what you're saying. You have to be wary because it could easily be interpreted as, now we just do what we do in Spanish, but we do it in English, or we do it in.
But it is a very dangerous thing to do, just to import mother tongue textbooks and assume the classes can function in a similar way to how they have functioned in the past in the children's mother tongue.
Yeah.
And that does happen in lots of contexts, that the only resources available are resources that teachers A, buy from native speaker contexts, or B, download from the internet. And create their own resources with what they find on the internet. I think in a way this is another flag or a suggestion to offer to systems moving to English medium education, isn't it? Is that whatever resources they use, they have to be second language learner friendly and concept and procedure learning friendly as well, which native speaker textbooks tend not to be.
Yeah.
Either language friendly or concept or procedure friendly.
Okay. I mean, again, it depends on the country, and it depends. I mean, if you look at the national curriculum in Britain, I mean, there's been some consciousness about that, hasn't there, with all the literacy stuff, and that. I think that you can take a book off the shelf in a shop in England, and it's not bad. There's.
Yeah, but I am talking about foreign and second language learners of these subjects, Phil, not the native speakers.
No, right. No. The importation of L1 stuff willy-nilly is a bad idea. I agree with you totally. I mean,
So that means that then systems moving to English medium education have to think about writing their own resources. Then, doesn't
God, yes, absolutely, totally, and that's that requires all sorts of planning, and it requires and that planning has to be taken into account before you jump in the swimming pool. I would always flag that up, as you say, as a precondition almost. I'm scared of some of the stuff that's hanging around the web at the moment. That seems to be offered as ready-made to use. I'm terrified by it. It doesn't seem to represent what I understand as CLIL.
Have you come across the OUP jog series, Phil? Have you?
Yeah.
They do have in the pack that goes with the series. It's like a DVD of all the raw source material that the teachers get, that they can actually alter and edit, because there are Word documents. They've got all the audio and video files and PowerPoints that are there that can be edited as well. In a way, my feeling about teachers becoming materials writers, which is never ideal anyway, because teachers are not materials writers, they should be given the raw ingredients, the raw instruments for their subjects, like is offered in that Jog 1 series. Although that's not aimed at a foreign language market, it's a good idea to have everything, all the bits and pieces, all the nuts and bolts that the teachers can put together in their own way.
Yeah, it gives you a basis. That's right. I mean, obviously, again, what we've done here is we've produced almost teacher-proof materials. It's they pretty much work on their own. But I think that what they do is they help the teachers to understand what we mean by CLIL. I would defend them on that basis. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I think this is one of the big problems that CLIL is coming across, isn't it? That whereas you don't want to delay its inception in any context because of a lack of resources, and yet you should say, hang on a minute, if you really want it to work, then you should do these things, or you should have at least a set of materials prepared that the teacher can consider, and even if they're a little bit effective, like the OUP stuff, at least it's something, and as you say, it's something they can work with themselves because it's in Word, I mean, I think the teachers here have got it lucky, I mean, they've had all the stuff, the lorry loads of the stuff, and they've just taken it in class. We've just been controlling what they're doing with it, but they haven't had to write it. You're right, and you're right. It's a good teacher is not necessarily a good materials writer, or vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, one issue I find in the countries I visit where subject teachers are being asked, cajoled, and forced into teaching through English is the fact that they're not really on board themselves. There are teachers who are interested, and there are even teachers who are very enthusiastic, but there tends to be this lack of kind of ownership, possibly, or even the vision that possibly comes from the people in the ministry is not usually there with the subject teachers. And from what you're saying, it feels like it might also be the case in Spain.
Well, it's almost as if we're saying that there needs to be some kind of preliminary period in planning, if it's centrally planned, whereby you probably get some materials together by some professional materials writers, and those are then piloted, and then if the piloting works and the things that work in the pilot are then expanded. I think that's again what happened here, and we're seeing the fruits of that now in terms of CLIL. I think that if you just go for it. You can just go for it. You can go for it, and and some stuff's going to stick, as they say. I think Andalusia, for example, again, Patty would say, Andalusia is amazing. I mean, there are all sorts of stuff going on down there. There's all sorts of good stuff, rubbish, medium stuff. It's all over the place, but at least people are going for it. And who am I to say don't do that? It's sort of chaotic brilliance down there.
It's got a life of its own in a way, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I've just written down Andalusia posting, because there was a posting in the Fact World group recently about a new resource site, wasn't there?
That's right,
I'll put that in our notes again so that it's there after your comment. Listen, let's draw to a close, because it's gone 1/2 past the hour, and we try and stick to an hour. Thanks for coping with the technical problems. I'm going to have to try and do a bit of research again and try and sort out whether it's my internet service provider. I don't know. It tended to get a bit better towards the end. I don't know whether that's because we lost a few speakers, but I'll have a look and I'll try and find out. And it's an ongoing learning process for me, I'm afraid. This recording conferences.
Yeah, you're very clear now. Is Lubiov there? Lubiov there? I want to. Hi, Lubiov. How you doing?
I'm fine, thanks.